Okay, man. So I think it's a combination of things. Excuse me, because I am sick, so I am definitely like in a Grumpy Bear onesie. But I don't think it's meant to erase trans men. I really don't. I don't think it's really trans men being timid from being raised and socialized as female and being trained to be in the background. And the reason that I say that is, I don't know if you've ever seen Big Fat Greek Wedding, but there's a line where the girl wants to date this guy, and he's not Greek, so her dad will not let her date him. And her mom comes over and is like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And, she goes, well, but the man is the head of the house, and the wife, and her mom, the guy's wife, says, well, yes, but the woman is the neck, and the neck tells the head where to go. So, basically, the mom is the boss, not the dad, but the dad thinks he's the boss. And I think it's similar in terms of the media is our neck. We think that we are in charge of what we're being outraged by and being looking at in the media, but the media tells us where to look, and tomorrow they'll tell us to look over here, and the next day we'll look over here, and it's never what should be looked at, it's always what they want to focus on so that they can hide something else. And I think a lot of it is to do with the media focus being on dangers of trans women. And the reason that I say that is not because I think trans women are dangerous, obviously, but because in terms of men who think that trans people are not valid, if they see a trans man, like you and me, we're just a woman trying to be in a man's world, so why would they be threatened? So, and whereas, if it's a trans woman, it's a guy who wants to be a woman, and there's two things about that. One, men are territorial of their women and their children. And the whole bathroom thing that the media chooses to focus on that is really not a huge deal, but everyone has to look at it because the media said so, is no one cares if I walk into the men's room. No one cared when I didn't pass if I walked into the men's room. Not a soul gave an ever-loving fuck. But when you see someone who presents more male and doesn't necessarily pass as a trans woman yet, or can't, or whatever, they don't pass to society's standards, then they're seen as predators who want to go and do bad things to women and children in bathrooms and diddle them. And obviously that's been proven many, many times to be false, but it's still, it comes from fear, if that makes sense. And I think it's more, and then the other half of that, this two-headed coin, or whatever that phrase is that the no homo culture says that if you are attracted to a trans woman as a man and you're straight, suddenly that threatens your manhood and your straightness because you are attracted to someone who you may not recognize as valid and therefore consider a man. Or maybe, you were attracted to them, they completely pass, and then you find out that they have or had a penis, and you are suddenly like, no homo, bro. And they have somehow threatened that to the point that very cowardly, usually white men, to the point of violence. And so I think that it's a combination of the patriarchy and the misogynistic culture that we live in, and also I think it's because, myself as a trans man, if no one bothers me, I am A-okay with that. So I am not, I mean, obviously I'm working on the medical transition side with the NHS and working on with my master's, but in terms of political stuff, I mean, I don't go out of my way to say I'm trans, to fight for trans rights, nothing like that, like, because I have passing privilege. And so for me, I feel like it's almost the easy route to just not make waves and not say anything. And I feel like because it is easier biologically for people who are born with a female body to transition and pass as men versus, because if you think about it, like when we transition, we grow facial hair, our voices get deeper, we tend to kind of straighten out in terms of curves. We pass as cis pretty well as a general rule. Whereas if you are a trans woman and you have transitioned after your first puberty, you are probably quite tall for a woman. You cannot you can't raise or high make your pitch higher in your voice without surgery and vocal training or vocal training. And so, and if you wish to get rid of facial hair and stuff, like, you have to have electrolysis. Most trans women that I know just shave daily, and it's harder to pass as a trans woman than it is as a trans man, is in terms of what I have seen and what I've experienced. It's easier for me to be like, haha, I'm so short, even though I'm tall for a woman, versus, everyone's seen it, the video of the lady in GameStop who's 6'4", broad shoulders, and has 5 o'clock shadow. And she is still very valid as a trans woman, but for ignorant people, it's easy. She's an easier target. And so I think that the reason that is kind of trans erasure with trans men is, one, I don't know about you, but I am A-okay to stay in the shadow. If no one wants to pop off at me, I'm alright. Whereas it's not so easy to do that as a trans woman. And then, like, even in sports, right now, I've been ranting about this because CrossFit just this year, for the first time, is allowing trans athletes. And I have beef with how they have decided to do that. Because it goes back to the whole, if you're a trans man, you're not a threat to cis men. You are lesser than, and you're weaker, and you don't have a leg up, and you're not cis, so they don't worry about you. And for trans men to compete in the CrossFit Games, the only thing that they have to do is say that they're trans. Say that they're a guy. That's it. That's literally it. That's all they have to do. But for trans women, there are, my God, I'm going to see if I can pull it up. Rules. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, so all athletes may select their gender. Athletes who register in a gender category other than their gender assigned at birth or different than the gender which they have been identified on CrossFit's website or representing to CrossFit that their gender in their everyday life matches their gender registration gender, which I do have a problem with because in a lot of CrossFit is international, and in a lot of countries you can't live as your identified gender. And they have obtained civil documents with their registration gender identified. And again, I mean, it took me a long ass time to get my driver's license with the right gender on it. So I frankly think it should be, you know what, I'm a dude. Let me compete with the men. So that's the only And this is transgender males, athletes who transition from female to male must satisfy the requirements I already said. On the other hand, transgender females, athletes who transition from male to female must satisfy the requirements set forth above and meet the following. Athletes must, prior to competing in the online qualifier or confirming their participation in the games, contact support at CrossFitGames.com to receive a declaration form to complete, declaring that their identity is female. That declaration cannot be changed for any sporting purpose for a minimum of 4 years. So my problem with that is not necessarily that you can't change it back. Although that's, I mean, I believe that gender can be fluid, so I do think that's kind of off. But the fact that trans men are not held to that. So right off the bat, we see that they're seeing trans women as somehow, having a leg up on cis women because they're men. And then athletes must demonstrate that their total testosterone level in serum has been below 10 nmol per liter for at least 12 months prior to their first CrossFit competition, with the requirement for any longer period to be based on a confidential case-by-case evaluation by CrossFit, considering whether or not 12 months is a sufficient length of time to minimize any advantage in women's competition. So there they've just blatantly said trans women have a leg up. And frankly, unless you have been on blockers, or you've had a vasectomy, or you've had lower surgery of some sort, that's very discriminatory to trans women who have not been able to have those. So I don't think that is very fair. And it must remain below 10 nmol per liter. I have a problem with that, because not only have they, and it goes on to say that it is still completely discretionary to the CrossFit people, that if they decide they just don't like the look of you, or the sound of you, or one of them had a bad lunch, they don't want to be nice right now, they can still say you can't participate. And also, they've released these guidelines, I want to say it was 1 or 2 months before the games, but they're requiring 12 months of evidence on testosterone levels. So, right off the bat, that's unfair, because it basically bars them, unless you've just randomly been tracking that shit for the last year plus, and because it can be longer if they feel like telling you longer. And like I said, all of this is just up to their gut, which is ridiculous. I think it's that because of our culture, people who are born male but choose to or they transition to female are seen as this threat. They're either coming in as superwomen or whatever the hell is with the CrossFit thing, they think it's some way to gain an athletic advantage, or it's threatening to their sexuality as or heterosexual men, or they think they're going to do bad things to their women and children because they're possessive of women and children. Even though that has been demystified many, many times, that's a myth. That's not a statistic that is real. There is absolutely no link between being transgender and having pedophilic tendencies. It's really just that I think the combination of that and the fact that it's harder to hide that you are trans when you are a trans woman versus a trans man. And I do think it's because, as a trans man, I'm very happy to pass and live as cis. I live stealth most of the time. I'm not I will tell people if it comes up, but I don't just go around like, hi, I'm trans Jude. People know, but it's just not something that I worry about. Whereas as a trans woman, that's something you generally have to worry about with terms of violence and media attention. And in addition, I mean, there is I can count half a dozen trans women in television, and the only 2 trans men I've seen on television, or 3, excuse me, 2 on the Fosters, which, I mean, it has a following, but not a huge one, and the one on Grey's Anatomy. And that's really not a big part of the storyline either. It is in the Fosters, but in Grey's, which is a popular show, I think it's really only come up like once. So I just don't think it's talked about as much, and I don't think it's as weird to ignorant people. Whereas I think that ignorant people think that it's weird when men want to be women, aka a person is a trans woman. So those are my thoughts on it.